February 16, 1942. A shell screeched in from the sea. War had come to the Western Hemisphere. Over the radio flashed the solemn news: Aruba had been shelled. Its oil refineries had been attacked by an enemy submarine. Where was Aruba? What was Aruba? West of Curaçao? Where was that? The names of the Dutch West Indies meant little to most Americans. We knew even less about the islands and territories themselves, about their location, about their appearance, or about their peoples. Yet today, sympathetic citizens of Kansas and Vermont know only too well that for a time at least, the flag of Holland flies over free Dutch soil only in the Caribbean seas at our very door. And today, a few history-minded Americans remember that in 1776, their own flag was first honored by a foreign power when the guns of the Dutch fort at St. Eustatius roared a salute to 13 young stars and stripes. But only a handful of American tourists have actually visited the last remnants of the great empire that Holland once created in the New World. They came back from Curaçao with stories of lovely Dutch buildings in a tropical setting, of shopping trips in the narrow streets of a strangely cosmopolitan city. In the Indies, they reported, South America came halfway to meet North America. The cultures of Northern Europe were mixed like a cocktail with the rhythm of rumbas and sambas. Their diaries sounded like old-fashioned travel talks. They had visited ancient cemeteries that recalled a host of romantic stories of men to whom the islands had offered a haven from the violence of 16th century Europe. Even more ancient memorials of a prehistoric time, picture writings that outlived the very cultures that produced them and are now merely local mysteries. In Suriname, the more adventuresome had actually seen a three-toed sloth, often said to be the laziest of God's creatures. Or they may have come upon an Indian settlement where the descendants of the fierce tribes that once ruled the Caribbean area still live in primitive style, dressing as little as possible and depending on the breadfruit for food. The tourists reported that island children played in the gold mines now abandoned, was once the object of vain scramblings for quick fortune. They saw ancient slave huts still standing a century after their occupants were freed and had left the salt mines, the rest a living from the sparkling sea. The Dutch West Indies were charming and quaint, but that was all in the days before geopolitics had become a household word, before the march of the fascist war machine had forced our attention to maps. Suriname, for instance, although a large part of its 50,000 square miles are covered with sparsely populated virgin forests, supplies the very bone structure of the modern war machine. Already in 1940, its bauxite beds were the source of more than a half of all American aluminum. Aluminum, today, most important mineral of the nations arming to win the technological battles of World War II. Few laymen know that aluminum is the commonest mineral in the Earth's crust. Yet only from bauxite can it be extracted quickly and cheaply enough to make it available in large quantities to the ever-hungry machines of the armament plants. In Washington, thousands of miles away, busy pencils calculate each load of the precious bauxite destined for American refining plants, where the rusty clay-like substance will be reduced to a gleaming metal of incredibly high tensile strength and astonishing lightness of weight. But the first task is to get the bauxite out of the jungle, for the mines at Moengo are separated from the sea by more than 100 miles of dense tropical growth. Dark, narrow rivers are the only means of communication with Suriname's interior. For generations, these rivers carried only the strange rafts and canoes of a race of former slaves who had gone native and retired to a jungle life on gaining their freedom. They went back to primitive gods and the simple ways of life. These natives came to know every hidden rock in the river's course. They learned how to protect themselves from the death that lurked on its banks or was hidden in its murky waters. To Dutch and American engineers, their knowledge proved indispensable as new and stranger craft had to be guided along the winding waters of the Cottica River. The ponderous bauxite boats feel their way through the fantastic backgrounds of luxuriant foliage. Today, as these ships literally sail through the forest, they carry American troops ever on the alert for danger. But they're not watching for jungle cats or boa constrictors. The real menace, now that this spectacular ship lane has become a vital artery of war supply, is sabotage. And the precious bauxite must be kept on the move, down to the harbor of Paramaribo and out across the Caribbean to play its important role in theaters of war flung round the world. Strange and complex is the modern world that industrial man has spun out of the materials of nature. Today, when famine threatens continental Europe, even the guano deposits of an exotic island in the Caribbean are related to the outcome of the war. For years, most of the phosphate of lime found on Curaçao went to Germany. It was spread on German fields to stimulate the growth of German crops. Although the phosphate is still gathered and shipped from Newport, the ships laden with fertilizer are bound for Allied ports. And in the nutrition strategy of World War II, their cargoes can be reckoned as assets against the Axis. But Curaçao has another harbor which is contributing even more directly to the victory of the democratic armies. Willemstad, since World War I, has become one of the busiest ports of the Western Hemisphere. In peacetime, ships of dozens of nations could be found taking advantage of its fine harbor installations and its shipyards, capable of carrying out extensive repairs. For Willemstad is not only the capital of the territory, but also the gate to the oil resources of the Caribbean region. Curaçao and the neighboring island of Aruba are important today because of oil, although not a single gusher has ever existed on the islands. Oil provides a livelihood for their people, although no well has ever been sunk into the island's volcanic base. The key to the riddle is a group of the largest oil refineries in the world. British, Dutch, Mexican, and American companies own the huge distilling and cracking plants that manufacture gasoline, fuel oil, gas oil, and diesel oil from the crude petroleum of the rich but landlocked oil fields of Venezuela, only 50 miles away. From the wells of Lake Maracaibo, Colombia, and Trinidad, the black gold comes into Curaçao and Aruba in a mosquito fleet of small tankers. In seagoing tankers, the finished petroleum products leave the islands for unannounced ports in eastern North America. For Dutch West Indian Oil is fueling the warships and the convoys, the tanks and the combat cars of the United Nations. In fighting planes and in bombers, it is helping to knock the fascist menace out of the skies of the world. The inhabitants of the islands have long since adjusted their lives to the constant coming and going of the oil. Traffic problems in Willemstad were always settled in favor of the tanker captains, and today there is certainly no challenge to the right-of-way of these brave sailors. And so it's no accident that the first shot in the Western Hemisphere was fired at the docks of an American oil company in Aruba. What more important target could enemy strategists have chosen than a key center of the great economic machine that is destined to vanquish them? What more fitting symbol of the unity of the United Nations? But the islands were not found unprepared. The small Dutch garrison had been trained for such an emergency. The islanders had quickly learned the techniques of war for the critical hour when they would be forced to defend their homes and their freedom. Later, they were joined by detachments of English and American troops, fully equipped with elaborate armaments. Every precaution was taken to guarantee the security of the island's essential industries. Enemy aliens and potential saboteurs were quickly rounded up and put in a concentration camp on the neighboring island of Bonaire. Today, the coasts of the Dutch West Indies are studded with firepower to repel an invader. Together, the Dutch and American forces have turned the islands into a veritable hornet's nest. The skies and the sea are under constant scrutiny for the signs of an approaching enemy. But the first line of defense is the harbors and ship channels. Destroyers and gunboats patrol them night and day. For the Dutch West Indies are vital to the United Nations as shipping centers. At all costs, the ships, their crews and cargoes must be able to come and go in the greatest possible safety. In these crucial days, the guns of Willemstad and Paramaribo are ever on the alert, for they're guarding the aluminum and oil and are going to maintain the armies of freedom wherever the battles of this great war are pitched. Little wonder that American soldiers are proud of helping to man these guns and of helping to keep the flag of a free people waving in honor.